Hello, my name is Comfortate. I am an associate professor at Providence College in the secondary education program. It has been an incredible 6 months immersing into the literature and amazed by the body of knowledge on global education. So, my initial perspectives about global education were that it focused on global levels and also focused on developing countries. And this is probably because of my cultural background originating from a developing country, Cameroon, where I worked on projects funded by the United States Agency for International Development to enhance the cropping systems of farmers to increase yields, reduce hunger and poverty, and increase lifestyles. As an agronomist, I did not encounter the constructs of global education, although I was engaged in activities that had relevance in global education. So my very first formal introduction to global education was through an interdisciplinary project on systems in collaboration with an esteemed colleague, Professor Steve Maker, may his soul rest in peace, who is of blessed memory and whose research projects aimed at contributing to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I was one of the instructors for students at my institution on a trip to Ghana to implement some of the innovations developed in Maker's Lab. Almost everything aimed at enhancing problems like literacy, sanitation, and health in developing countries. So in reading and learning about the Sustainable Development Goals, I then started to develop a more nuanced understanding of global education, which was still latent at the global level, focusing on developing countries. So global education sounded very remote from anything I was doing locally as a teacher educator. My institution, for example, has a Center for Global Education that focuses mostly on study abroad programs, which again reiterates for me the emphasis at the global level. My naive perspectives on global education shifted as I interacted with my colleague and former GTE fellow, Professor Laura Howers. Kudos to her, she just got a very big grant to enhance global education in the state of Rhode Island. So she shared her work as a global educator with me. I was thrilled at seeing this global construct in her classroom as she engaged her teacher candidates in learning through virtual interaction with counterparts that she had in other countries and in creating children's book. I immediately knew that I wanted that experience for my teacher candidates. But how? So this is when I became interested in the GTE Fellow, the Longview program, and I applied. It has been a humbling but exciting experience during the past 6 months as a GTE Fellow. Through exceptional webinars, readings, support by great program leaders, Longview Foundation headed by Dr. Juan, support by a great mentor, Dr. Dala Diedov, who is internationally renowned as a scholar in international or intercultural competence, and my personal intentionality to grow my knowledge and skills as a global education citizen. It has been challenging learning to be competent as a global educator teacher and at the same time engaging teacher candidates to become global education teachers and citizens and competent to teach students to become global citizens. Very complex. So through the GTE assignments that challenged me to revise my course syllabus, I learned very quickly that global education is an abstract construct as set by the literature, and it involves the mindset, which begins at the intrapersonal level, micro, the local level, before one can begin to think globally. It is complex and requires intentionality and hard work to unravel this complexity. So, systems thinking, that is a framework that is dear to me in my teaching, scholarship, and service, has been instrumental in unpacking the multifaceted components of global education. Competence in global education is not an easy feat. I have quickly learned that developing global education competence is a lifelong journey with cognitive demands. One can easily be overwhelmed at the huge body of knowledge on global education, which requires that one must have an area of focus to contribute to the whole system of global education. Thus, my area of focus is classroom assessment, which itself is complex, right? The essential question that guided me in revising my course, Educational Measurement, that focuses on classroom assessment was, how do I translate the principles of global education at the micro level of a course? So I looked at the three core notions of global education: respect for diversity, solidarity, shared sense of humanity. And in reflecting on global education at the local level, I decided to focus on developing cultural competence, which embodies the three core notions. Therefore, the learning outcome that I had for my global education item in my course was for teacher candidates to develop cultural competence in assessment, which is crucial in becoming global education citizen. So through cultural competence, teacher candidates will be able to explain, to plan, to create, implement, and evaluate assessment and make decisions with equity in mind. Every student, irrespective of their cultural identity, will be able to succeed in a classroom where there is respect for diversity, where there is solidarity, and where there is a shared sense of humanity. So in revising my course, I basically identified elements in the literature on global education that I could easily implement while maintaining the course learning outcomes. As stated in the literature, global education should not be an add-on, right? And there are all these elements that we do, but do not recognize that they are related to global education. So most of the instructional and assessment activities that I implemented were same as I had in the past, with few revisions, mostly with me being intentional in reiterating for the students some aspects of the activities. For example, I continue to refer to assessment for equity and for social justice, which was not something I did intentionally in the past. I engage my students in reading articles on developing skills for cultural competence, and to do that this time, to engage them in the reading and understanding, I used a social platform, Perusal, that presented an opportunity for the students to share their knowledge with their peers through annotations, questions, responses, which enhance their knowledge on cultural competence, as I saw in their reflections. I also continue to insist that students reflect on strategies they will include in their lesson plans to engage every student in the classroom, irrespective of their cultural background, especially students who have been historically marginalized with respect to access to knowledge. So in examining students' lesson plans and their reflection, I could quickly, anecdotically, state that these students, their engagement and their reflection were far better than I have seen in the past. So for example, they included things like building relationship with their students, to create a rapport that will reduce teacher power and allow students to share and ask questions and take risks in their classes. So the awareness of self, which is an important aspect in cultural competence, was probably enhanced through an assignment that had engaged them in completing an implicit bias survey. So through that survey, the results helped them, and most of them were shocked by the unconscious biases that they held on different cultural groups. Their lesson plans, unlike in the past, showed that they were aware of this diversity in their classes, and in identifying instructional materials that would help all their students. So by the end of a global education course like the one that I had, I expected the students to all demonstrate knowledge on cultural competence. It was initially challenging for students, right? Because there was one assignment that I introduced, and it had to do with them developing ownership in their learning based on the underlying theories of learning contract. So in working through these assignments and collaborating with their peers, at the end, it was clear that the students had developed a sense of engagement, a sense of empowerment, and they were able to learn a lot as depicted in their learning project. I will continue to use learning project in future. However, I am going to revise my course syllabus so that students do not feel overwhelmed with the course expectations. I want to thank the Longview Foundation for the opportunity to participate in this program. Scholars in the global education who shared so much knowledge with us during webinars. I also want to thank former GTE fellows who shared their experiences with us. I want to thank the director of the program, and also thank my mentor, Dala Diedov, who was so patient with me and challenged me to think deeply about global education at a local level with a focus on assessment. I have learned a lot. It was a rich learning experience for me that I must continue in all my courses in developing competence in global education for myself and for my students. I want to thank everyone again, and I hope many more teacher educators are going to find this useful and engage their students in global education, because it is something that we do and it's not an addition to what we have been doing.